Most mornings feel the same for me. Coffee brewing, slippers dragging across the floor, and a quick trip to the mailbox before the day truly begins. Usually it's nothing special. Bills, ads, maybe a flyer from the local pizza place. But that morning, my eyes caught something different. A red envelope with little hearts scattered across the paper, standing out like a secret waiting to be told. My first thought was innocent, almost tender. Valentine's Day was close, and maybe, just maybe, Daniel had remembered this time. I let myself smile, holding on to that tiny hope, the kind that warms you even when you know better. I carried the envelope inside like it was fragile, something meant to be cherished. For a brief moment, I let myself believe in the possibility of romance. Sitting at the kitchen table, I slid my finger under the flap, expecting a playful note, maybe even something I had ordered for him and forgotten about. But when I unfolded the card, my breath caught. The handwriting was clear. Forever yours, Melissa. My chest tightened as if the air had been punched out of me. The refrigerator's hum, the clock's ticking, everything faded. Valentine's Day, the cruelest timing imaginable. I just sat there, staring at the words as if the ink might rearrange itself into something less devastating. Melissa. A name I didn't recognize, but one that suddenly felt like a dagger carving through the life I thought I knew. My fingers trembled against the glossy paper, the kind chosen carefully, meant for someone cherished. I wanted to laugh, or maybe scream, but nothing came out. Instead, I placed the card flat on the table, studying it like evidence in a crime. The loops of her handwriting were soft, almost delicate, as though every curve had been meant for him alone. Forever yours. And the kind of phrase a woman doesn't toss around lightly. My chest ached, and I pressed a hand against it, as if I could keep my heart from shattering right there in the kitchen. I thought of Daniel, of the way he'd kissed me goodbye that morning, rushed but familiar, as though nothing at all was out of place. Had he already read this card? Or was this meant to be delivered secretly, slipped into his hands at work while I played the fool at home? The questions circled in my mind, but the answers, I knew, would only hurt more. I folded the card back into its envelope, careful not to tear it further, as though preserving it would somehow make sense of the chaos inside me. My hands felt cold, even though the kitchen was warm. I kept glancing at the window, half expecting the world outside to reflect what I was feeling. Storms, thunder, something dramatic. But the sun kept shining, completely indifferent to my heartbreak. I tried to breathe, slow and steady, but each inhale caught on the lump rising in my throat. 22 years of marriage, memories of anniversaries, vacations, late-night talks. They all felt tainted now, stained by a name I had never spoken before today. Melissa. Who was she? How long had she been in the shadows of my life, weaving herself into places she didn't belong? I pushed the envelope away, as though distance could soften the blow, but it stayed there on the table like a scar I couldn't cover. Part of me wanted to confront Daniel immediately, to throw the card in his face and demand the truth. But another part whispered that I needed to think, to watch, to gather more than just a single piece of evidence. And that part of me, it was louder. I didn't say a word to Daniel that night. He came home, dropped his keys in the bowl by the door, kissed my cheek, and asked what was for dinner. I smiled. I answered. I played the part of the wife he thought I was. Inside, though, my mind was burning. That card was tucked away in the drawer of my nightstand, and every time I glanced at him, I felt its weight pressing against me. The next days became a silent theater of observation. I noticed things I had brushed off before. The way he kept his phone turned face down, how he slipped into the other room to answer calls, the vague explanations about deadlines and last-minute meetings. Maybe I'd been too trusting. Maybe I'd chosen not to see. But once suspicion takes root, it grows fast, twisting around every little detail like ivy on brick. At dinner one evening, I watched him scroll on his phone, smiling faintly, then lock the screen when I leaned closer. My fork hovered midair, my appetite gone. "Who are you texting?" I wanted to ask, but I swallowed the words. No, not yet. Confrontation would only give him a chance to lie. Instead, I decided to watch carefully, to let him reveal himself without realizing he was on stage. One night, after he'd fallen asleep, I sat in the glow of my laptop and typed her name into the search bar, Melissa. It felt dangerous, almost shameful, like I was trespassing into a place I wasn't supposed to be. But when the results appeared, my pulse raced. There she was, smiling in photos from company events, standing too close to Daniel in one, her hand almost brushing his arm. My stomach tightened like a fist. Scrolling through her profile was like peeling back layers of a life I never knew was woven into mine. She was younger, ambitious, with captions about late nights at the office that now carried a meaning I couldn't ignore. Each picture stung, not just because of her, but because of the version of Daniel that existed in her orbit. A man who laughed freely, who looked lighter. A man who wasn't mine in those moments. I closed the laptop, my reflection staring back at me in the dark screen. My cheeks were flushed, my eyes wet, and I hated how small I felt. But instead of breaking down, something inside me steadied. I had spent too long being the woman who overlooked, who forgave, who filled the silences with excuses. Not this time. I wouldn't scream. I wouldn't beg. No, I would wait. And when the time was right, I would act. The more I watched him, the clearer the pattern became. Late nights at work stretched longer, dinners grew colder, and excuses piled up like clutter in a forgotten room. Every "I'm just tired" sounded emptier, every half smile felt rehearsed. I learned to nod, to murmur agreement, while inside I was tallying each lie like entries in a hidden ledger. There were moments I wanted to slam the card down in front of him, to demand answers right there at the table. But then I'd remind myself, timing is power. If I confronted him too soon, he'd twist it, deny it, maybe even laugh it off. I needed more than a card. I needed certainty, a truth he couldn't wriggle out of. So I carried on, wearing my mask, letting him believe nothing had changed. All the while, I was sketching plans in my mind, quiet but sharp, and then, on one particularly lonely evening, I realized something. This wasn't going to end with me begging for honesty. No, I was going to give Daniel a Valentine's Day he would never forget. I became the wife he expected to see, maybe even better than before. Smiles at the door, his favorite meals on the table, casual touches on his arm. If Daniel noticed the change, he must have thought guilt had blinded me into trying harder. He didn't realize he was watching a performance, and I was playing the role of my life. Valentine's Day was my curtain call. I suggested a dinner at home, just the two of us, something intimate and romantic. He agreed too quickly, his eyes flickering with relief, as though it gave him the excuse he needed to keep up appearances. I matched his enthusiasm, hiding the bitterness that threatened to spill through every word. In my heart, though, the plan was already set in motion. The dinner wasn't about love, it was about truth. Candles, wine, soft music, all of it carefully arranged, not to seduce him, but to corner him. I wanted him comfortable, unsuspecting. Because the surprise I had in store wasn't one wrapped in ribbon. It was one that would shatter the fantasy he thought he was in control of. I spent the week leading up to Valentine's playing my part with precision. At breakfast, I asked about his schedule, pretending to care about his late-night meetings. In the evenings, I pressed a kiss to his cheek, feigning gratitude for how hard he worked. And every time, he looked relieved, convinced I was still the trusting wife who would never question him. Behind that mask, though, I was busy crafting the perfect trap. I reached out to a friend who worked at his office, careful with my words, careful with my tone. When she confirmed Melissa's shift, a cold calm settled over me. The puzzle pieces were lining up too neatly to be coincidence. That's when I wrote the note. Just a single sheet of paper, no signature, no trace. Come to Daniel's house at 8 p.m. He says he has a surprise for you. My hand didn't tremble as I folded it, sealed it, and sent it off. Because deep down, I wasn't nervous anymore. I was ready. On Valentine's Day, the house transformed into a stage. I set the table with our best china, the crystal glasses we rarely touched, and a bottle of wine Daniel had been saving for a special occasion. Candles flickered, soft music hummed in the background, and everything looked like a perfect picture of devotion. To him, it would feel like love. To me, it was strategy. As I laid out the final touches, I felt no hesitation, no guilt. Instead, there was a strange steadiness in me, like I'd finally taken control of a story that had been slipping through my fingers for too long. Every napkin folded, every dish arranged, was a reminder that this night belonged to me, not to him, not to her, to me. I looked around the room one last time and caught my reflection in the window. Calm, composed, almost radiant. I realized then that Daniel had no idea what was coming. And Melissa, well, she would soon learn she wasn't stepping into a love story. She was walking into the truth, and I was ready to open the door for both of them. Daniel walked through the door that evening with flowers in his hand and a nervous smile on his face. The kind of smile that tries too hard, that hides more than it reveals. He kissed my cheek, complimented the dinner setup, and poured himself a glass of wine like everything was perfectly normal. I watched him closely, and for once I didn't feel small. I felt powerful. I floated around the table, warm and attentive, pouring his drink, laughing at his jokes, giving him the illusion of comfort. He thought he was safe here, that the little world he built on lies was still standing. Every word out of his mouth was another brick in the facade he believed I hadn't seen through. And then the doorbell rang. Sharp, sudden. Daniel's smile faltered, his glass frozen halfway to his lips. My heart beat steady as I rose from my chair, each step deliberate. I didn't need to say a word. I opened the door, and there she was, Melissa, dressed for romance, confusion flickering in her eyes. I stepped aside, letting her in. Melissa's eyes darted from me to Daniel, her lips parting as if to speak, but no words came. Daniel's face drained of color, the flowers still clutched in his hand like a pitiful shield. For a long moment, silence stretched between us, thick and suffocating, the kind that makes every second feel like an hour. I closed the door gently, almost ceremoniously, and walked back to the table. "Please," I said softly, motioning toward the chairs. My voice surprised even me, calm, controlled, laced with a quiet authority I hadn't felt in years. Melissa hesitated, but Daniel remained rooted to the spot, his jaw tight, his eyes pleading. He looked like a man watching his entire life collapse, brick by brick, and knowing he had built the ruin himself. I reached into my pocket, pulled out the Valentine's card, and placed it on the table between the wine glasses. The red envelope looked almost innocent under the candlelight, but its weight was crushing. I leaned back in my chair, folded my hands, and looked at him. "Why don't you explain this?" I said, my voice steady. "To us both?" Daniel's mouth opened, then closed again, as though the words he needed kept slipping away. His hand hovered above the table, but he didn't touch the card. Melissa finally stepped forward, her heels clicking against the floor, her face caught between anger and embarrassment. "Daniel," she whispered, "what is this?" Her voice cracked, and I could see her own illusions unraveling. He stammered, reaching for excuses. Late nights, misunderstandings, anything that might soften the truth. But every syllable sounded hollow, like a man rehearsing lies he no longer believed himself. I watched him squirm, no longer the confident husband who strutted through the door with flowers, but a boy caught red-handed, desperate for an escape that didn't exist. I said nothing. I didn't need to. My silence was louder than any accusation, and the card on the table spoke for itself. Melissa's face hardened, realization dawning that she wasn't Daniel's great love, just another secret in his double life. And Daniel? He sat there, trapped, both of us waiting for him to dig his own grave, one shaky word at a time. I leaned back in my chair, watching the two of them drown in the silence. For once, I didn't feel the urge to cry, to beg, or to demand answers. No. I felt steady, almost detached, as though I had already made peace with the truth. When Daniel finally muttered some pitiful excuse about confusion and misunderstandings, I lifted my glass and took a slow sip of wine. His world was crumbling, and I had no intention of saving him. Melissa sat rigid, her eyes narrowing as she pieced it all together. The way he had promised her more, the way he had painted me as the oblivious wife in the background. But here I was, in full control, proving to her, and to him, that I wasn't blind, and I wasn't weak. I could almost see the betrayal settle in her bones, the sting of realizing she wasn't special, just another chapter in his lies. Finally, I set my glass down and looked directly at Daniel. "You should know," I said evenly, "that I've already spoken to a lawyer. The savings account? It's in my name now." His eyes widened, his jaw slackened, and in that single moment, the balance of power shifted forever. I wasn't his victim anymore. I was the one holding the pen to write the ending. Daniel's face twisted, somewhere between disbelief and desperation. He sputtered, "You can't just—" But I cut him off with a look. That same look I'd worn for years, softened by patience, dulled by love. Only now it was steel. He shrank back into his chair, realizing too late that the rules of our marriage had already been rewritten. By me. Melissa shifted uncomfortably, her confidence unraveling as she realized she'd been invited into a scene she never wanted to play a part in. She looked at him, her voice low, almost trembling. "You told me she didn't matter." The betrayal in her tone was almost poetic. For once, Daniel had no comforting lie to offer, no hand to reach for. Both of us were watching him fall apart, and neither of us was reaching to catch him. I let the silence stretch before I spoke again, slowly, deliberately. "If you want him," I said, turning my eyes to Melissa, "you can have him. But you should know, what's left of him isn't much. Broke, exposed, and very, very alone." The words didn't need volume. They carried their weight in truth, and in that moment, I knew I had already won. I stood up slowly, smoothing the fabric of my dress, letting the chair scrape softly against the floor. My movements were calm, deliberate, as though I had all the time in the world. Daniel's eyes followed me, wide and pleading, but I didn't give him the satisfaction of a second glance. My hand brushed against the envelope one last time before I left it there, a reminder of where his lies had led us. Melissa looked torn, caught between fury and shame, but I didn't envy her. She could keep him if she wanted, though something told me she was already questioning that choice. I almost pitied her, but then I remembered the delicate handwriting on that card, the arrogance of believing she could sign herself, "Forever yours." No, pity wasn't necessary. She would learn her own lessons soon enough. With my keys in hand, I walked to the door, head high, dignity intact. I didn't slam it, didn't make a scene. I simply left, leaving Daniel surrounded by the ruins of his own making. A mistress who suddenly wasn't so enchanted, a marriage in ashes, and no money to soften the blow. I didn't need revenge wrapped in fire. I had delivered it cold, precise, and final.